So you don't bad mind the Prime Minister?
Bad mind him, no. But when him keep up arms house, I point it out. Never come and say, well, you know what, if I win, I'm going to get that. I'm going to take my salary after all. No, I never mentioned that. Come in and debate with me, never disclose it. Bam! After win the election, so next thing we hear, the Prime Minister is going to take a big salary after all. So I'm saying, that con business that. You should have tell the people, say you intended to do that. So that is why I'm coming with him bad mind hat. But it's not bad mind. It's pointing out that this was a very dishonest thing for a Prime Minister to withhold that information from the people, which is something he knows would have been a very relevant consideration in their minds, because he knows how strong the people felt about it, which is why he didn't disclose it.
Yo, people, come back to the fix. It's going on here with Ari, Javi.
Hey.
We have the ops in the building. It's not our ops. Before we get to that, we have to say big ups to our sponsors. KFC. All right, they have the new saucy wings, hot and spicy wings tossed in sweet red chili or citrus chipotle barbecue sauce. A shout out to KFC, the finger-licking flavor of Carnival. As I said, people, we have the ops in the building. The leader of the opposition, that is. Our friend Mark Golden is here.
Hey.
Nice.
Friend of the show at this point.
Nice to be
have you,
here.
sir. Thank you for being early. Earlier than some of us here. Guilty.
Yeah.
Nice to be here again.
Guilty.
Thanks for joining us again, sir. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How are you coming off your presentation in the
well, you know,
Parliament?
it was well received.
Yeah.
So I was happy about that. It's always a kind of stressful time before, because you have to put a lot of thought into it, a lot of research.
I know.
And, you know, so it's a bit stressful, but for all of us, I think even for the PM himself. Yeah. So, but it's good to be over.
Well, tell me, like, what goes into the research process?
Well,
And how long does it take?
Yeah.
Months.
Well, I would say I was working on that for 3-4 weeks, maybe, off and on. And then you get people sending you ideas. So, you know, and often they send them very late in the day. Like they think, oh, you can just add this in at the last minute. You know, I must say.
People are part of it too, I'm assuming,
But the research, because, for me, I try to really understand the budget. You know, and even though I'm not a finance spokesperson anymore, I once was, I do try and understand it from a technical point of view. There's a document called the Fiscal Policy Paper, which is one of the documents tabled with the budget, which is very useful and has a lot of information in it. And then, so I go through that quite carefully. And in fact, there is a convention that I can write to the financial secretary at the Ministry of Finance, who's the head of that ministry from a civil service perspective, and ask any questions arising from any of the budget papers. So I always do that and copy the minister out of courtesy, you know, so she knows what I'm asking. And, you know, that helps to fill in any gaps. Sometimes you identify things that are wrong and they correct them and so on. Yeah, so there's a lot of research, broader research too. You know, if you're going to, for example, say something critical, you want to make sure that you've recorded it correctly, what was said and what, you know, and so you just try and make sure you don't have any errors in your budget document.
Is there any specific point you wanted to drive home, like even going into the research? You say, all right, this is something that I'm definitely going to hone in on.
Right. Well, because this budget involved the imposition of taxes, which the government has for a long time been, you know, proudly saying they are not doing that. So it represented a departure from their recent practice. And it's happening at a time when the economy was hit by Melissa. So, you know, we've experienced 2 consecutive years of negative growth in Jamaica, Beryl-induced and Melissa-induced. So from a kind of distance, looking at that, it's a bit controversial, because you'd say, why, when the economy is under pressure and is contracting, would you be putting taxes on? Because that's kind of what you call pro-cyclical. In other words, it reinforces the trend rather than tries to reverse the trend. So that was a theme that we thought we should focus on. And my colleague, Julian Robinson, spent quite a lot of time with his team looking at how we could provide an option for an alternative approach. And for me, it was more looking at the medium term and saying, okay, we've been hammered by Melissa. The productive capacity of the country, especially in Western Jamaica, has been badly hit.
Yeah.
People have been really badly affected. Farmers, householders, institutions generally, and businesses. So, what should the government be doing to try and get us back from that? And so I kind of used the line from our song, our very popular campaign song, March We Are March, Build Back Better Than Before. So I used the Build Back Better theme.
Timely song.
Yeah. And sort of said, well, what does building back better involve? Right. And, this is a problem. What's being done about that? Typically, not much. So I would then say, well, this is what we would do. So I was looking at a kind of medium term set of prescriptions or ideas, proposals drawn from our manifesto to show that wasn't just a document for the election, but was something that we think is valid and worthy and worth pursuing.
Yeah.
And I kind of restated some of those ideas, in the speech as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would building back better mean for the average Jamaican family?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say for those who have had their home badly damaged or destroyed, it means building back a resilient home for them or ensuring that they have the wherewithal to do so. That's one. Ensuring that the farmers of the country are able to produce food and we're able to become more self-sufficient, I think, at a time when the geopolitics of the world is so unstable. Supply chains are under stress again. And it keeps happening because you remember a few years ago, it was the Ukraine-Russian war that was impacting prices and grain prices, fertilizer. Now we have an even worse situation on our hands. So, now is a time when, we really ought to be, those things which are really critical to our own security as a country, we need to try and ensure that we have a handle on that. So agriculture is another area I think we have to build back better than before. Make our farmers more resilient, more efficient, more modern, and so on. The school system and the training system of the country. Again, we're in a situation where our economy, despite all the good work that's been done over many years now to get the public debt under control, we're still not seeing that translate into a strong economy, powerful, growing economy. Right. So our economy is sputtering along at very low levels of growth. And part of that is because we're not very productive and we have to improve productivity. And then part of that is better energy prices and a better energy system in the country, but also ensuring that our people are prepared for the world of work and are able to do tasks, add value in an efficient way so that Jamaica can move up the value chain. So that means really investing in training, for example, in the training systems of the country. And I put forward some proposals as to how we would incentivize companies to invest more in training, using, basically saying that some of the resources that Heart has should be used in the private sector in training so that a company that wants to upskill its workforce can invest in doing so and will get what we said was a dollar for dollar matching. So for every dollar they invest in that, the government would match that. And, just to incentivize that, because we really have to get out of this low growth, low tech economy and move to, because look, Jamaica's so blessed.
Yes.
Right? We're such a impressive set of people. Look at you guys. Right? And yet, if you check the ratio, our GDP per capita, sound like what a highfalutin thing, but essentially what that means is how much our country produces per person is only 7,000 US a year compared to Barbados, which is 20 odd thousand, Trinidad 20, Bahamas even more so. So what that means is that we're much less well off than we should be. Yeah. And then we have all this talent here. So something is not right in the way we've organized our affairs. And so to me, building back better is around tackling those issues so we can get behind and get ahead of that and put that behind us and move forward in a stronger way. Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to you and I was saying that, you mentioned that the government didn't impose taxes for so long. And you mentioned that, because of Melissa, the recovery to impose tax, it kind of seemed out of left field. So is it the opposition's policy? Well, would not have implemented any tax, and like how could we have mitigated against? Yeah.
So I understand that the government is in a bind because the economy has taken this hit. their revenue collections are less than they had anticipated. And so they have to find resources to make the difference. So I understand that. But there are different ways in which you can tackle that problem. And, we thought, it's not just an accounting exercise where you say, well, you have a deficit of X, so you have to find new revenue of X. And the easiest way of doing that is just to put some taxes on the people. No, there are other things that we think could be done to fill that gap. And Julian focused on that. And what he came up with was essentially increasing the efficiency of the tax system by introducing real-time invoicing, where the tax collectorate is aware of all transactions going on in the economy on a timely basis, so that they know where firms are underreporting, and so they can be more effective at collecting. This is something which has been done. Many other countries have done this, and to great effect. It has increased the revenues substantially without any new taxes, and it's better for the economy because people who play by the rules are no longer at a disadvantage versus others who are collecting revenue but not paying it over to the government.
So wait, so you're saying it's focused on businesses?
That's focused on businesses primarily.
Right. So you wouldn't necessarily focus on
individuals?
GCT, right?
Well, no, GCT is an important part of it. But yes, are they, because how GCT works is when a company buys something, it pays GCT. And when it sells, it charges GCT on what it sells, and the difference is the value added.
Yeah.
So it's and that goes to the government between the output and the input tax.
Right.
So the thing is that if you're not reporting that accurately, then there can be significant leakage of revenue. And that is what real-time invoicing is designed to achieve. So that was one thing that we suggested, that we looked through all of the public bodies to see where there are surpluses, that the government could take some resources towards this. And we identified a couple billion that could be from Factories Corporation and the Bank of Jamaica. And then this idea of digital nomads, which is something that Barbados kind of pioneered in our region during COVID, where they essentially made it attractive and easy for professionals and business people who are digital nomads, meaning that they don't have to be based in New York or London or California. They can go anywhere as long as an internet access, and they can do their thing, and attracting them to come and live in the country. And of course, they then spend their money there, and it tends to generate a lot of revenue from that. So he was suggesting that we should adopt that. And, Jamaica has a lot going for it. We have good connectivity, a good climate, and cool hip culture, etc. So the feeling was that if we put some effort there, we could. So those were some of the things that he put forward. And
people would hear that and think that is madness, seeing that it already seems like the country is overpopulated. And we're going to invite even more people in. Like, you go on the roads, there's traffic everywhere. Everywhere just seems overcrowded. What would you say, like, is the at least to make it seem more logical to people that would have that mindset, said that no make no sense?
Well, remember, Jamaica attracts like 4 million tourists every year to our shores, and we accommodate them fairly easily. I mean, I wouldn't say this is a high traffic type of activity. These are typically higher net worth individuals who are coming to live, in an environment where they feel comfortable, where they can do their thing professionally, but also live a lifestyle which is conducive to how they want to live. So I don't think the numbers of people we're talking about wouldn't really put major stresses on our infrastructure or our road network and so on. And, typically they would be people who would be, if they're renting a place, it would be at the higher end of the market and so on. So they wouldn't be competing with our people who are already struggling to find the money to rent or buy a home. So this was the idea, and it has worked pretty well in Barbados. I think that their thing may have, had a strong impact in the earlier years. Their thing is kind of maturing now. So we, in our design and in our proposition to the market, we'd have to kind of come with a niche that would be attractive. But I don't think it's beyond us to do things like that.
No, and I mean, for the most part, I know a couple of people who have, who are, as they said, digital nomads who do remote work, and they come, they enjoy, they clock out, and they partake in the culture, as we say, but it's not a lot, so maybe that is it. We need to probably do a
and they wouldn't have to necessarily live in the densely populated areas. They might, for example, want to live in more serene areas or areas that are by the coast where there's a more resort-like atmosphere and so on, you know. But this is something, as I said, we didn't invent this. This is something which is being done elsewhere in comparable places quite successfully. So we thought this is something we should look at. We were trying to think out of the box to say, all right, you have a slight problem with the balance of the budget. Your first refuge shouldn't be to go put tax on sweet drink and put environmental protection levy, raise that, because that's going to put pure pressure on the people. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the people. So we were saying there are other ways that we could approach this, you know. In opposition, that's part of what your role is. You don't have an army of civil servants reporting to you to go through everything, and you know, you have to kind of use information available to you and your creative thinking and the team around you and come up with ideas, and that's what we were doing.
You've called for Jamaica to seek compensation from developed countries for polluting countries for Hurricane Melissa, a move that has seemed like it has largely failed. What makes you feel that is a move that would work?
I wouldn't say it's largely failed, Naro. It's actually a movement that is starting. So last year, the International Court of Justice that sits in The Hague in Holland, which is the world court under the UN system, they, on a case that was brought by a very small island in the Pacific, made a ruling to say that there can be liability for having created global warming. And so that decision, it was what we call a declaratory judgment. So they didn't impose an order for payment on any defendant, but they said the law, international law, does recognize that in a situation where climate change is causing serious damage and loss to more vulnerable countries, and it's being caused by polluting countries, there is potentially liability for that. So that is a kind of backdrop. Then I said, well, we now are one of the big victims of climate change in Jamaica. We were hit.
Melissa.
Beryl first, and now Melissa, which was the mother of all whammies, as they'd say. You know, we got a real serious, like 56% of our annual output is the damage that was caused by Melissa based on the most recent assessment. $12.2 billion US. And we're in a part of the world where this could happen again. And again. So what we're going to do is just take it and don't do nothing about it. And the response is borrow a whole bag of money to rebuild the country, because that's really what the government has gone out and said they plan to do. They've managed, because of Jamaica's success in reducing our debt and running a tight fiscal ship, they've gone out and they have identified from our international development partners, largely the IMF and the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, $6.7 billion US, the bulk of which is loans that they plan to borrow to try and do these projects that the Prime Minister announced in his budget speech, you know, rebuilding Black River or moving it slightly, doing something in Lucy, doing something in Falmouth, etc. All of this is borrowed money. So what if we're being put in a position where our economy, our assets are being hammered by this phenomenon of climate change? We are not the ones causing it. We are not big polluters or producers of greenhouse gases. Other countries are, and they're not doing anything about it. They're just paying lip service to it. And the World Court, the International Court of Justice, has said, hey, this is an area where you can be liable. So I'm saying, let's push the envelope, because who knows what might come out of that process. There are all these funds that have been established under the movement to try and address climate change. You know, this COP, they have these conference of parties, the COP meetings every year. They've had them for quite a long time now, trying to...
What meetings?
COP.
Oh. I just wanted to
COP. Conference of Parties, I think it's So these meetings have led to various funds being established that are supposed to deal with aspects of climate change. But the money is not there in those funds in any great volume. But, you know, if we rally other countries and push the agenda. You know, who knows, the pressure will rise and maybe they'll start to make bigger contributions to those funds that we can then use to draw down for more concessionary finance than what we're being forced to right now. So it's more a strategic move. I'm not suggesting now that we'll win a case next year and get a big whack of money.
I'm just wondering how realistic is the approach.
Yeah, no, it is a strategic approach to try and set the agenda, change the narrative, make countries realize that small countries like us are serious about this thing. We're not just going to become victims to the damage that the environment is causing us as a result of their bad behavior, and try and push the agenda along those lines. You know?
I mean, it wouldn't be a same loan. I would have said, like, instead of the loans that we're taking, you know, it should be fun, like grants. Like, well, you know,
ideally, that's right. Well, I mean, but the grant funding available is minimal compared to the needs, you know. So this is what I'm saying, you know, this is unfair, clearly unjust.
It is.
So, you know, where there's a gap in justice, you must run to assert your rights.
And I feel like if CARICOM was even a much better regional body where we could come together as a collective to, I guess, pursue this legally, you know, it would probably stand up, I guess, more in
and, you know, in fairness, like Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, she has been championing various reforms to the world financial system to address some of these issues. I mean, I think Jamaica should get behind her more on that, on, you know, on those issues and other CARICOM countries. But I wanted to start a debate around this issue because I was aware of the decision of the International Court of Justice. I was aware of the fact that we are victims of climate change in Jamaica, and the chances are that this could happen in the future again, and we need to protect ourselves. So I wanted to put that kernel of thought in the minds of the people and see where it can go.
Cause each year the hurricane season progressively gets worse and worse. Because I remember Maria, they said that was catastrophic and once in a lifetime, and then here come Melissa like 2 years later, I think, and you know, just as devastating.
And of course, Melissa was particularly frightening because the pattern, how it actually arose, it was very different to the normal way. It was just this big weather system that was kind of drifting along very slowly in the Caribbean. And then, but of course, because of the warming of the sea, it intensified very rapidly. And then it does take a right turn and liquid down. So, you know, I'm saying we can't just ignore these things.
No, we can't.
We need to protect ourselves.
In the budget debate, you mentioned that JLP has a lethargic legislative agenda. What do you mean by that? What's lethargic about it?
No, they're very, very slow at delivering on important pieces of legislation. I think I named 5 in my speech. Things that are critical for one reason or another that need to be fixed or done, and they just take forever to get it done. And I'm, you know, because I'm a former Minister of Justice back when we were in government the last time, and I was responsible for delivering the legislation of the government then, I'm very aware of what it takes to get things done in our system. And it really requires a hands-on approach. You have to manage that agenda. You have to get the draftsmen, get the other policy people who have to be part of the process, mobilize them, inspire them, and get them going. And it can be done. But I'm very, you know, this is not a strong point for the current government. And so I felt I should make that point because it doesn't cost a lot of money. This is not a money-based problem. This is a management problem. And it's a problem that needs to be fixed if we're going to move forward with some of the things we have to do. So that's why I made that point.
But you don't think it's based on bureaucratic hold-up where it seems as if it's lethargic? We're trying, especially when there's so many, I guess I wouldn't want to call them institutional roadblocks, but you know, the oversight of Interior Commission, everything, like all these, the media, everything that's really like put in place to ensure that, you know, the government is on the up and up. There's no corruption, everything like that. That's why maybe it's slower than it should be.
I think that there are bureaucratic issues that need to be addressed in relation to, for example, why our capital budget is underspent year after year after year. You know, what I was trying to do was focus on legislation specifically, which is critical because the whole bureaucracy is a rule-based system. So the legislation has to authorize what it is you want to do. And if you're not developing and delivering on that legislation on a timely basis, you're not agile, you're slow, you're stuck in your ways, and you wish you could make progress, but you're not making it because the civil servants and other public sector officers are not going to operate in a way that the rules don't allow. This is why I said, we shouldn't, and in answer to your point, I think that the system of developing legislation, there are a number of steps that have to take place before it even comes to Parliament.
Yeah.
And often it has to be reviewed and commented on by different agencies, and it goes in and out of the drafter's hands on multiple occasions during its development. You have to monitor that. You have to track that. And you have to make sure that it doesn't sit on anybody's desk inordinately long. So that's part of managing the process.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think that's being adequately done.
I think Audrey Marks now, she's an efficient minister.
Yes.
Minister of efficiency.
Yes.
Which I have long, what's so funny? I've long championed this because I really do agree that Jamaica is unnecessarily slow. Like things that would take 10 minutes, like you're in tax office and a transaction would have take like 10 minutes. You're in there the whole day. So I do agree with that there needs to be some management of people and resources.
And I support, her work.
Yeah.
And I think that to the extent she's able to deliver on tangible improvements, that would be great. But I don't think she's going to have a big impact in the legislative side of it because that's kind of out of her purview. But that side needs attention because it's fundamental to how government operates. Yeah.
But then the thing is, I was saying like with that too, because would it be necessarily the government or the minister's fault when there's so many technocrats and other people in there that would stymie the bills, the legislation that needs to come? So how much of it is it the ministers or the government in its totality?
If you're not proactive and if you don't make it your job to make sure it gets done, which is why you're elected, then you can just relax, go have a drink some wine with your colleagues and say, oh, well, I don't see that for 3 weeks, but sure, let's go have another drink. Yeah, and things just putter along at their normal pace, which is too slow. Or you can call the phone and say, how I don't get this back yet? What's the problem? Is there a problem? There might be a problem. Maybe it's a problem you can solve. And you try and get things moving. So I'm talking it's proactive management as the political head of the ministry, which is what the minister is. It's their job to drive that along. And not through cutting corners which shouldn't be cut, but by inspiring people to be efficient and to work as a team and get the thing done. When I was Minister of Justice, we were in an IMF program. And there were these things called structural benchmarks, which were these promises in our agreement that we were going to do to change the system and improve it so that Jamaica could get itself out of the hole. I was in charge of delivering the legislative agenda under that for those 4 to 5 years. So I had to be very hands-on in doing that, because if we didn't, the agreement said, we must bring in new insolvency legislation to Parliament by, let's just say, March 2015, or we must change the security interests in personal property legislation or introduce that by April 20. There was a lot of deadlines with deliverables, and I was determined that I wasn't going to be the reason why we didn't pass an IMF test.
Right.
So that required some close management, and I'm saying it's possible. It's quite easy to just not be hands-on and just leave it to them, But when you do that, things happen at their pace. And they have a different agenda to you. These are typically career bureaucrats, whereas you're only there for a few years and you want to make a mark and get things done.
Yeah.
For the people. Yeah.
But I guess because in your time there were IMF tests that you had to pass, why maybe it felt like things were moving at a faster pace than now where we
Well, this is it. But I don't think you can only be motivated because some international agency says, this is what you need to do and get it done by a certain date. If you know what is required to move things along, then you make it your business to set that agenda and pursue it yourself. We're independent. We must put on the mindset of people who can manage their own business.
So how many of the legislations that you think they're lethargic on, has it affected us negatively or adversely, where they've not delivered or they're not moving at a fast pace, in your opinion?
As I cited in my speech, I just cited 5 examples, right? But there are many others. Yeah. But they cover a wide range of things. For example, in Jamaica today, if two teenagers, boyfriend, girlfriend, have sex, it's a criminal offense. They get hauled before the court. If they're convicted, they go in the sex offenders registry, and it's a complete blot on their record forever. And this is crazy. And the Joint Select Committee of Parliament reviewed that law and said there are some changes that should be made to that to decriminalize teenage promiscuity, but intensify the penalties for predatory behavior by pedophiles, right? That is now that's been languishing for years. And if you look at the court list of cases coming before the court, that offense of having sex with under 16 years old is one of the main things that comes before the Supreme Court every year. And it's part of why the system is so slow. And it also impacts those children's lives in a really negative way. That's just one example. That should have been dealt with years now. And there are many others,
Right.
So the whole thing with the firearms law, where if you're found with a bullet or a gun illegal, it's mandatory minimum 15 years, right? Yeah. Mandatory minimum 15 years. Now, there was a system where we have a big problem with backlog of cases in our courts. And there was a system where the law incentivized people who are guilty to plead guilty and get that case out the system so that they would be shifted out of the courts into the correctional facilities and do their time. When they introduced this mandatory minimum sentence of firearms, it meant that you could no longer just use the early plea system. So there's a big backlog of cases as a result, because everybody said, well, me not take no 15-year mandatory minimum. Let me drag out this thing and see what happened at trial. Maybe the witness will migrate, as sometimes happens, and the case collapse and they get off. So that's something that needs to be fixed. But no, we can't see the fix coming.
Okay.
And I didn't use the fix.
I wonder if that was on purpose. During the presentation,
the fix is here. But
so that was an amendment, right? Because that's an amendment to that mandatory, right?
And there are other things. There's a piece of legislation that was tabled, which had a provision which would allow companies to migrate to Jamaica. If they want, companies, let us say, who are incorporated in another jurisdiction could deregister there and register here. And that I thought was a very good thing, because there are people who might want to come and register their companies here Jamaica, and for various reasons, and we should be encouraging that. No, that can't come to fruition. So this is just what I'm, things that would help, which don't cost no money. It's just management that would really help our system to be more up to date, more efficient, and are taking too long.
I agree with that.
An invitation written in style. Daylight Ibiza, letters and looks. This Easter Sunday, April 5th. Dress code, signature chic, Kingston, Jamaica. Yours truly, Daylight Ibiza.
See you in the garden.
During the presentation, you brought up claims that bottled water is more expensive than gas, and you also argued to remove the GCT from bottled water. The Prime Minister hit back at those claims, arguing that, he wouldn't trust anybody with the economy that has this start.
So a bottle of water on the road or in a corner shop, $100 for a bottle of water. GCT is included in that, all right? It might have gone up in the last week, right? But that was the price at the time. So that is half a liter of that contains a half liter bottle, typically. The one I was talking about, which is a slightly narrow version to this. Yeah. So I said 2 of that is 1 liter, because it's half a liter each. 2 of that costs $200. When you check a stock, if you go to the gas station, the price of gas is less than $200 for a liter. Water costs more than gas in Jamaica. That was the point I was making. And if you're trying to encourage healthy lifestyle habits, instead of a man or a lady go on the road, get thirsty and say, I'm going to drink something with a whip of sugar in it, encourage them to drink water. Buy a bottle of water. Don't have no sugar in it. But the GCT is increasing the price. So I was suggesting, if health improvements of the health condition of the country and incentivizing people to drink and more healthy things was the motive of this tax. Why not arrange the things so that you're incentivizing more healthy consumption habits?
But the thing is,
you argue that other cheaper options exist.
Yeah, but the thing is too, the person, the retailer is the person that put on the price of it, because the wholesale price is different from the retail price.
Yeah. Everybody in the supply chain.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because when I go in the supermarket, that is probably like $50-$60. But if I'm on the road, supply and demand, man say 100, and because if I go to Champs now,
3 bills for a bucket.
a 3 of water. So I mean, it's just really the wholesaler that, or the retailer, not necessarily the wholesaler. Maybe we should probably ask the retailer to be a little bit more considerate. I don't know.
I'm not. I don't think that they're price gouging.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody in the supply chain wants their margin. That's why they're in business, right? So but the price is $100. That's what it's on the road selling for. And I'm just saying, to me, it was a kind of interesting point, because nobody would think that water per liter is more expensive than gas.
And depending on where you're going, because where I live, a $220 fuel gas.
Right. Me too, but it depends where you go.
Yeah.
But I did a survey. And many gas stations were selling gas at 180 to 190.
Yeah, that's a downtown. That's why make sure we go.
Portmore.
Make sure go them down.
Of course, prices will change, and with this Middle East situation, we're gonna see all of that go up. But the point I was making was, hey, there are more healthy alternatives that are subject to tax. So if you're thinking about trying to encourage people's behavior to in a more healthy direction, look at this. That's what
because the thing is, Pepsi, if it's $100 for the water, a $150 for the Pepsi, a $200 the bar when we go the other day. So I'm still not bad at Pepsi, but still,
if you're a Pepsi lover, I'm not, but I was just making the point that maybe we could make things that are healthy a little bit more affordable for the people.
No, I totally agree with that. So if that was the overall point, because I was like, maybe comparing it to gas maybe was not the right one.
I thought I compared it to gas because it was a shocking example, which I think most people would not have appreciated, maybe, including me. It was only when somebody pointed out to me that I thought, wow, that's a striking thing, Yeah, and then the Prime Minister come and talk about you can't get water for $44. I was like,
well, no, not $44. Well, wholesale.
He's obviously not shopping on the road.
Right, he's not shopping in the supermarket. Yeah.
Nobody not approach if you're a water sponsor.
Not yet.
But then you pull out the anti-bad boy not. You surprised, I never waited tonight.
Did he actually take it? Did he accept your gift?
The hat?
Yeah.
No, sir. I said, who the cap fit him should wear it. Yeah.
On a politician,
but he said he got it just
hilarious.
For you.
He said, I'm your joke. So you don't bad mind the Prime Minister?
Bad mind him, no. But when him keep up arms house, I point it out.
As in the should, That's what. That's the
point I was making is, when them increase the salaries for ministers, Prime Minister, leader of the opposition, them increase it. Them come to Parliament, the cabinet had approved this and they announced it. Massive increase. This was at the time when the teachers got 20%, the classroom teachers and others, right? So him now, when the pressure reached him now over that, because everybody was very upset at the time, him say, well, he's not going to take his salary, right? And that was that. That was like 2 years ago, whatever it was, 3 years ago. Going to the general election, him never promised anything about, never said anything about it. He never come and say, well, you know what, if I win, I'm going to get that, I'm going to take my salary after all. No, he never mentioned that. Come in and debate with me, never disclose it. Bam! After win the election, so next thing we hear, the Prime Minister is going to take him big salary after all. So I'm saying it's a con business that. You should have tell the people say we intended to do that. So that is why I'm coming with him bad mind hat. But it's not bad mind. It's pointing out that this was a very dishonest thing for a Prime Minister to withhold that information from the people, which is something he knows would have been a very relevant consideration in their minds, because he knows how strong the people felt about it, which is why he didn't disclose it in the first place. Now, as opposition, we must point out these things. Not bad mind. That's our job.
But he's saying that the opposition spokespersons, they were happy for the retroactive increase.
So him say somebody call him and tell him keep it. Yeah, I don't know. He didn't disclose who that person is. And listen, each person has to make up their own mind about their life and how them deal with things, you know. But from a policy perspective, I was upset about it because I remember the teachers were fighting hard, and Nigel Clark, who was then the minister, was pressuring them and saying if they didn't accept the offer, you know, their retroactive was going to be deferred for years and so on. And they capitulated and accepted the offer. And they got the classroom teachers got 20% over 3 years. And then within a month, them come to Parliament and say Cabinet approved 200 and something % increase for ministers. And I was like, no, sir. That's not right. You know, and how can you make that decision as a government for yourself and have other people who are out there delivering critical services like teaching, nursing, etc., and they're not going to feel justified by that. So, that is why it upset me. And I made a commitment personally that I was going to give away 80% of my retroactive and my salary because in solidarity with the teachers and others who got the 20%.
You have done so, and where have you emptied it to?
Well, the retroactive I gave to a number of charities and other, like Food for the Poor, Missionaries for the Poor, Joytown Foundation, Jamaica Paralympic Association, a number. And my salary now, we run a project in my constituency. There's a lot of sites where people from outside and also some from inside dump garbage, and it's not, it causes rats and flies and people burn it and it's toxic smoke and things. It's horrible. And solid waste not efficient at dealing with this. So I put together a project which I fund out of my 80%, where I pay people to monitor those sites, gather up the garbage, put it into containers, and I work with solid waste to try and get them to come and clear those containers on a timely basis. And it's been going well. I think it's 7 different sites and then we rotate the people who get the benefit of that so that they work on I think either monthly or fortnightly shifts. So the opportunity for these are people typically who may not be working or whatever, and they're glad for the stipend. So that's what I do.
So you're rich, so you not even want your pay?
I want it, I want it.
You're that rich, you're like,
I want it, but
I'm giving it away.
I gave the commitment, and I try to honor my commitments.
Okay.
And I said that I would maintain this for as long as it takes until the teachers resolve their issues, and they're still working on some of those issues, as I understand it, things to do with their increments and all that, which they were, So, I've continued with it.
So when you see yourself putting in all this work and doing these things, have you ever doubted your decision to remain in politics after losing the election?
Well, after the election and we didn't win, I went through a period of reflection, because we worked really hard and it was a long thing, because remember we had local government elections in 2024 and those had been put off 2 or 3 times. So we had been preparing I was really in campaign mode for 5 years. And for me, because I was not in elected politics for very long before, I wasn't like, I thought, well known on the road by the average person. So I had to go out there and meet people and let them know who I am. And
that's true.
But, eventually I became marketing and people know who I am. But so it was a lot of effort, and we did much better than we had before. We doubled our seats from 14 to 28. We got over 100,000 more votes than we got in 2020. We got over 400,000 votes in total in the election. So, there were some positives, but at the end of the day, politics is you don't come second, you lose. So, I had to reflect on that.
Yes.
And I over time, with the amount of people who come and say, boy, don't leave, and once you stay, man, your time will come. And, I think people appreciate some of the ideas we've come with and the way we've tried to hold the government to account and so on. They appreciate that effort. So I'm like, boy, I'll stay a little longer and, we'll see what I can do.
You feel like the seat I get a little hotter, like some knives start come out and I say, on in the PMP, that is, because there might be some people that say maybe you are not the person to lead the party, to become
Well, look,
the government.
we're a democratic party, so we have rules around when that can happen, and it's always possible, you know. And you know, but right now, I don't really think that would. I don't anticipate that happening, to be honest, because the mood within the party, I think, is that we've seen progress and we'd like to just build on what we've achieved so far and take it over the line next time. So I don't think the party wants to see any internal destabilization or anything.
Yeah, it never worked in a favor before.
Yeah. It's like,
but I have to ask though, like with the Portland Eastern seat.
Yes.
That was a major upset. I was shocked. I was shooketh. I genuinely was. Like, eyes at Miss Vaz.
Yes.
Can you just share a little bit about just the mechanism, the internal politics mechanism with going after that seat? Was that like a seat that you guys wanted to reclaim? Because you guys had it for 40 odd years.
I mean, we were fully aware of the fact that there's a strong PNP base in that seat. And it's a seat that we had for many years. And Dr. Bloomfield was a much loved MP, and then he was murdered. You remember that's how it became vacant, and there was a by-election and so on. We were also aware that Ms. Vaz was very good at social media, but on the ground, there were rumblings about the service that people felt, you know, they were not getting and so on. ISAT is a charismatic figure. And when he said to me, you know, he was interested in running, and, you know, we were looking for the right candidate for East Portland, and they wanted him. The constituents name and say, give it ISAT? Well, what happened was, not a whole when it became known that he was interested, the constituency organization, the PMP in the constituency, you know, became aware of it, and they were anxious. You know, they thought he could win it. So, and he was willing to go. And ISAT is a charismatic guy, and he thinks out the box, and he's a human rights champion and a defender of the people. And him go
the cartel effect. Do you think that was it?
I don't know. I mean, cartel never really played a role in the campaign. But of course, getting cartel to win the case at the Privy Council and was a big thing for ISAT and raised his profile.
Well, that was before came to the conference, the PNP conference. Carter came.
Yeah, man. But that was before ISAT became the candidate. Yeah.
So he never really was a part of the campaign.
Right.
No,
but it's just the effect.
I mean, they're good friends, I'm sure, and thing, but he wasn't active in the campaign on the ground, you know. But so I wasn't surprised.
You weren't?
No, wow. I was just pleased. But I wasn't surprised. In other words, when we were looking at how we were going to win and where the seats were, that was one that we thought we had a good chance in. Yeah.
Wow.
There were others that we were disappointed in, you know. If you check it, you know, we got 28 seats. We needed 32 to win.
Yeah.
And the 4 seats that we were counting on, that we didn't, if you add up the margin that we lost them by, those 4 at the top, total is just over 1,000 votes. You know, that's how close the election was.
Wow.
Yeah.
What lessons would you say you would learn from the defeat? You say you did some soul searching essentially.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like, you could have done better?
I would say that the traditional approaches to how you campaign are not as important as ensuring that in the last 48 hours, you have what it takes to respond to what's going on in the close seats in particular, which are necessary to win. That's where the result was determined. It wasn't the campaign, in my opinion. If you look, we ran a really good campaign. Our meetings our meetings were ram. Our space was energized. But on the day itself, on the night before, certain things did go down, which I'm not going to really discuss here, but certain things did go down and made a big difference. So we have to manage that better. Things I think that we learned was the importance of unity. You know, that even though the money we had to spend was modest compared to our opponents, you know, the fact that we were united and that I think we had a good message of things that were attractive to people, and so that was useful and helped our cause. But there were some organizational issues where we weren't fighting the same battle that they were, you know?
Right. Yes.
And we have to be much more mindful of that.
Okay. So you know, you've learned you said that the 48 hours are crucial. So it's like you've learned how to manage these different personalities too, because as you realize, everybody have fight different battles when the bigger war is to be won, and they're not focused on that big war. So how you respond to these smaller issues?
Well, I think that's something which we did fairly well, because when I took over in 2020, there were a lot of issues within the party because we had a series of challenges for leadership over the last 10 years before.
Rise United.
All kind of something. So, I put a lot of effort into just getting people to Lego them thing there and just realize what the bigger picture is and what we are really in this for. And I would say 99% of the people came on board and the leadership. So I felt that was really good, and they pulled their weight, and we did, I thought we did well from that perspective. So but the things I'm talking about are really, how you counter certain tactics that are going to be deployed to kind of make your people not to want to come out and vote or that sort of thing.
I hope it's not like intimidation.
No, thank God, not much of that. Yeah, not much of
good.
that.
If it's that you run a next campaign again and you lose, would you still want to be in leadership of the PNP? Is that something that you would consider saying, okay, maybe it's time for me to step down?
I'm open to departure, From my personal perspective, this is really not about me. I'm really, really responding to the call of those around me who see that I have value to add, or they think so. That my style of leadership is conducive to bringing people together, and that the people feel they can have trust and confidence that I'm not here to scrape, and that I'm not here to enrich myself, but I'm really here to try and make life better for the people of the country. Now, if the time comes when that's no longer how I'm perceived, I'm not going to try and hold on for, it's not, as I said, it's really not about personal ambition of mine or anything. I'm 60 years old. I don't believe in being old and grey and decrepit in the House of Parliament. I think, must give youngsters a chance to emerge as well. So, I'm only going to be here for as long as I'm wanted and where people feel I can deliver value, and perhaps more so than, what else is on the table at the time. But once that paradigm changes, once that dynamic is different, I'm cool, man. I can do other things.
It seemed as if like the fracture in the party that was happening for so long, and you guys finally resolve it. Like that was plaguing. You think that was plaguing your leadership in the party overall, like your position,
my personal position,
right?
I think that when I became the leader, I inherited some of the situation which had not been adequately addressed and resolved, and and then there are actors out there who feed on that and maybe are even motivated by inducements to push certain narratives and things, which is very unpleasant. So I got a lot of lies being told about me and my personal issues around my family and my color, all kind of things. It was a very,
wait, you were British, well,
your citizenship.
I mean,
I had 2 passports. Yeah.
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah,
because you renounced it, right?
I renounced that one. Yeah, I mean, and some people are saying I shouldn't have bothered to do that. That was something I inherited from my dad because my dad was British, but he came here in the early 50s and he never left. And is a man who did some very good work in this country and established what is now the Sir John Golding Rehab Center, Mona Rehab. And his whole life was building institutions, Hope Valley Experimental School. 2 of my colleagues went there. My dad was one of the founders of that school and thing. So, I was born here. I grew up here, but I had... From I was little, my parents had got me a British passport, and I have, I never really thought anything of this at the time. But then it became an issue, and although our constitution allows dual citizenship, where it's a Commonwealth thing, which the UK is, I didn't want any of my colleagues who are maybe in close contests in a seat to suffer because our opponents were making a big deal out of this thing. So I said, here what? But that's a good leg of that, So I went through that process and I got rid of that. So.
Yeah, because to many it felt like, you have a escape plan.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
I
Yeah.
understand that. So
And you know, I forgot you the shit we have forgot you with
Right.
US embassy and all
of
UK
that.
something.
Well, right now I
pay so much money for rejection.
Exactly, and I understood all of that,
Yeah.
you know. So I gave it up, and now you know, if I want to go to the UK, I have to go look at visa and thing. Yeah, but,
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
And in fact, the truth of the matter is, even when I had that passport,
Yeah.
because I wasn't comfortable with traveling on it, because I was in politics, I was in public life, and I thought, you know, so I actually, for example, we visited the UK in 2022, I think it was, or 3, on a tour. Went to London and Birmingham, and I applied and got a visa in my Jamaican passport to travel on it. Yeah, so
Okay.
I haven't used that passport to travel, and I might have a US visa in my Jamaican passport as well. So it was just there in the draw, you know. But you know, but it became this big issue, so I just said, "Heck, man," you know, and got rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, young voters in particular are alienated. They feel alienated from both parties. What creative measures would you put in place to restore faith?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think part of it's a generational thing too, because I mean, some of us who are at the leadership level now, you know, we're maybe in our 50s or 60s and so on, and we grew up in a different environment to what our young Jamaicans grew up in, who, you know, where they grew up in the era of social media and of screens and getting information and interacting really through all of that. We grew up different, you know. So when I grew up, you know, there was one originally. I remember there was one black and white channel on TV, and that was it, JBC, you know. And then it went color in the 80s. I remember, and then of course technology and everything evolved so rapidly, and so we're all digital natives. But so reaching out and understanding and how to connect with young people is very important, I think, for us. So here I am on the fix, man. You know, you know, I figure you probably have a young audience, you know, so give people a chance to see me, you know, interacting with y'all and thing. And generally speaking, I think creating opportunities where young people can engage and have conversations and assess who you really are, what your vibe is like and thing. And, you know, that's all part of it. So it's just it's a process of really actively trying to reach out. And something which I think we need to do more of, and I hope to do more of.
Yeah,
But-
because apathy has really plagued the votership.
I mean, like I said, like it's definitely it's a difficult balancing act that has to be achieved, because you know, there are campaign methods that you see work over the years, and you don't necessarily want to abandon that because you know it work with grassroots people. But then again, you have to try to find innovative ways to, you know, appeal to the youth. And so it's like it's a difficult little balancing.
It is.
Yeah.
that
And
has to
also,
take place.
people are very transactional now.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of young people are like, boy, you know, what's in it for me? You know,
You'd say it's even more so now than back in the day, because back in the day, like, more people that take a box food and say, yeah, man, yeah, I'm a vote.
Well, put it this way. I think in the era I grew up in, the idea of fighting for a cause was, I think people related to that more, and they were a lot more of the thing. Politics was much more on a voluntary basis, for example. Then party workers didn't even get a stipend or anything, but they turned up and they did, you know, because them love them party, and it was all part about, you know, moving Jamaica forward.
Right.
Nowadays, people don't really stay so them saying, if you're not doing nothing for me, they're really business, right? So how you get into people's consciousness to understand that, your personal needs are important, but you're part of a whole. You're part of a system. You're part of a country. And you have a role to play at that level as well. And you mustn't suppress that part of your personality. You must look about your personal interests, yes, but at the same time realize that your personal interests are very impacted by the bigger picture in many ways. You know, what bus fare costs, if you have a car, how much pothole on the road, if you get sick, what the situation is like in the health system, if you're going to school, what the conditions are like in the education system. These things matter to you, but you might be living in a bubble and you're just living in a
No, individualized. That's the
individual's
problem.
life, you know?
Very much
Yeah.
self-centered.
So I think you have to try and break through that,
Yeah.
and not do it in a way where people feel you don't understand them, or rate them, or you're idealistic and naive because I know really so life go. But it's more trying to get people to understand, yes, there is the I and there's the we, and both are important. You can't be monodimensional, because life is multidimensional, and part of being a human being and living a full life is understanding the impact that you can have, not only on your circle, but also more broadly, and how you can participate, and how important it is that you become actively engaged. So this is what we're trying to do.
Is there any way, let's speaking about legislation and kind of just go back, but it tie into young people voting. I think many people, how can we change the voting process? Because especially in meaning people register in Mobe, but they come to school in Kingston to learn, and then having to go back to Mobe. Is there somewhere a joint committee between both parties, like the government and the opposition, we can come together and reform that sort of voting, where it just have an ID, show up and vote?
Absolutely.
Like it don't have to be based on where you are registered to vote.
Correct.
Yeah, because I know that's the major thing. That's
it's a
even with
big
young
issue.
people.
Because there are lots of people in Jamaica who no longer live day to day where they registered to vote. And then you only get 3 hours off by your employer. So if you're in Kingston and you're registered to vote in East Hanover, there's no way you can go and vote unless you're prepared to take the day.
Me nah go.
You know, go. Right.
I mean, I take the day for the my business.
That's the Irish thing.
Oh, I'm tell them say vote.
Yeah, but the short answer is yes. The good thing is that our electoral system is now structured where we have a commission that's in charge of electoral matters called the ECJ, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. And it has representatives of both parties on it, and independence. And so it is a system which has worked well for Jamaica over the last, 30 years or whatever it is. It evolved out of the 1970s over time, and it's become like a best standard across the world. You know, so where our system has been admired for having, because remember, we used to be plagued with terrible political violence. We no longer have that problem and so on. So the structure is there for reforms to be debated, but I think it's the mindset now of the people in that who have that responsibility should be around how do we make the system more user friendly? Because as you said, even to enumerate to vote, why can't you do it online?
Yeah.
You know, why do you have to go through this archaic system? I'm sure there are good reasons, but can those reasons be addressed in other ways so that we can have an easier access to it? And then again, the whole voting system, you know, why you remember one of the reasons why we have, I thought, a low turnout, which was a surprisingly low turnout in the last election, when the polls had indicated that we were expecting a turnout of about 55%. We ended up with 39, I think it was, right?
Wow.
Which was a big difference to but the lines were long and the voting process was often very slow. And that was partly because they weren't allowing people to vote on their old ID.
Yes.
And many people hadn't collected their new ID because you have to go to some place to go collect that. And nobody has the time to go do that.
There's too much run around.
Because what I had to do is I never collected my new ID. I still had, that was it. People waited in line, and then we had to do a different thing and a swearing, and yes, I swear I'm this, da, 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 da. And it was this whole thing, and I'm like, oh,
and
Jesus
it takes
Christ.
much longer.
It takes much longer.
So people in line for longer. So some of them just get tired and
walk out.
Worse if all rainfall, which I think rain did fall in the morning.
Yes.
So, you know,
I saw one man drop down, like it was that bad. Like,
So we need to really look at how we can make the system easier. Why can't a person who is registered to vote, wherever they are, they should be able to vote wherever, and it be counted in the appropriate ballot box where they are enumerated without them have to physically go and vote in that polling station. This is a high-tech era now.
Yeah. So we need now.
Yes.
Needs.
Well, I wouldn't say needs now. Where is needs?
Right, but you know, because
needs.
that was an issue that you guys had, but that was a proposal. I think that was supposed to be a part of trying to change this system.
Well, what happened with that was, you know,
but the
we were
opposition was
agreed.
against it.
I think both sides agreed that there should be a national ID. However, when the legislation was developed, it was going to require mandatory biometric information being in a database. And if you didn't submit your biometric information, whether it be your blood type or your fingerprint or whatever, it would be a criminal offense, and you could be excluded from all sorts of normal benefits. So we said, no, that's not going to pass muster. That's unconstitutional. The government never listened. Them got through with the thing. So a case was brought to test it, and the case was successful, and the whole news legislation was struck down as being unconstitutional. So they had to make some adjustments to it, which they did, and it came back to Parliament and it passed. And so now it's being rolled out. Kind of slow, but it's being rolled out.
Very slowly,
So we're not sure what impact it's going to have, but it is coming.
Yeah, because I think that was a part of it, trying to it would probably make it seamless,
right,
and be a coalesce.
Right. Hello, we're live.
Had to go by R, right?
So what is? I'm sorry, but bring it all together in one seamless thing. So in that sense, we I guess the opposition is in alignment with that, like just one national identification system, right?
We accept that for example, a lot of issues around fraud and so on could be mitigated if we had a strong ID system, and transactions could be implemented more quickly and that kind of thing. So we just didn't like the elements of the rules around it that were too intrusive. And so once those were modified, we were more relaxed about it. But we're just not seeing it happen.
I need to get on that.
You said that the reasons offered by the government to terminate the Cuban medical program is unconvincing. Expound on that. What about their reasons that you would say is unconvincing?
Well, the fact that they pay the arrangement, it's a bilateral agreement between Cuba and Jamaican government. It's been going on for 50 years, right? And it involves Cubans who are working in their health system are offered the opportunity to work overseas, in this case in Jamaica. And the government in Jamaica, by agreement, pays the Cuban government money for providing these healthcare workers, and they get some of their salary in Cuba and they get some here. Their overtime and so on is paid here. That's been going on for a long time. The government suddenly says, oh, well, that arrangement is violating our labor laws. I don't believe that's the case. We have lots of instances of outsourcing in Jamaica where persons are paid by a company that provides their labor to whether it's janitorial services, toll road operators, all over the place. They're companies that are engaged typically by the government, but not only. Some private sector people do that as well. They pay a firm, and then the firm take our money out of it and pays the workers. So it's not unusual. Similarly, even in the UN system, I'm told, when, for example, our military go abroad and there's some compensation arrangement, the soldiers are not paid directly by the UN. The government is paid. So I just wasn't convinced by this, and I thought it was just an excuse because the government had taken a decision that whatever pressure was being brought to them by the US, they didn't want to resist that any longer.
And you genuinely believe that it's because of pressure from the US? That is the reason behind it?
100%.
Yeah, you and many other Jamaicans.
Yeah, 100%.
The timing of it just seems...
But I wasn't really...
The
angle I was taking on it wasn't to bun them out for having succumbed to that pressure. That wasn't my angle.
Because some people would say like they understand what other choices do we have.
Well, I don't even know because I'm not in the room where that pressure is being brought to bear. So I don't even know. But the angle I took on it was, the current agreement expired in 2023. So you've had this long time and you know that the US is uncomfortable with this whole thing. What other arrangements are going to be put in place?
Right.
And what happened is they basically ended it. The government, Jamaica ended it. Cuba was still in discussions with them about it. The government decided to end it, but then there's nothing in place. And so all these people are waiting on and hoping to get a free cataract operation at St. Joseph's. What, they're not going to get it. All those people who are in remote health centers where it's the Cuban doctors who they rely on are going to be without that.
Uncle able to get it before all of this.
So my thing is, you know, if you're going to make a move like that, you can't let the people suffer from it. You have to make alternative arrangements and string out the thing until you put everything in place. And I don't think that was done. So we were critical about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. It took everybody by surprise because we've had a good relationship with Cuba, albeit, you know, the difficulties that they've been having, especially trying to just maintain themselves as a nation.
For real. I see Mexico has today said that they're not terminating their arrangement with them. They're going to continue with it.
Mexico have cartels.
Yeah.
So we have our
cartel, but them cartels
Mexico,
different.
like produce a lot, they're fine. Okay. No, but again, the imminent threat, I asked Minister Dr. Tufton this, like the imminent threat of another Cold War or an impending war in the region, because the president of America said that he's looking to get Cuba next, and we are Cuba's closest neighbor. So even having conversations with the prime minister about this imminent threat, is that something that you guys are talking about? Is that something that the PNP as a organization is worried about? Like, what's happening? Because I know the relationship between Cuba and the PNP especially is very much close.
Yeah, we have good relations with them, and they've been good partners to Jamaica. You know, they've been generous to Jamaica. They built GC Foster College, which has trained so many of our coaches, which is why our whole track program is like superb and delivers all these wonderful results at the highest level. You know, they've played a big role in the health system and so on. So, yeah, I mean, we're not in any discussion with the government about this. The government doesn't tend to discuss much with us, to be honest. You know, there's a forum, they call it the Vale Royal Talks, which is supposed to allow off-the-record discussions around issues which are best dealt with like that, where we can try and make some progress rather than always being like this. We haven't had a meeting for a long time.
Whose fault?
I think it's the government's fault, because they're the ones who set the agenda. They're the ones who convene those talks, and they know that we're open to them. I mean, we have never declined to go to when invited, and we're prepared to discuss whatever needs to be discussed. I just don't think they put a high level of importance on dialogue with us.
Well, no, that's not good. I mean, that's not good.
It is what it is.
Yeah. But if, especially with an impending threat like this, you're more than willing to
there's a whole heap of stuff, because there's a whole situation with Cuba, and you know, they're under tremendous strain, and we're very close. I think it's 90 miles from our closest point. That's not far. If their situation there gets really, really, really bad, it could impact us. And then, of course, there's a whole question of what's happening in the Middle East and the impact that's already happening. I mean, every week the gas price has been going up for weeks, and it's going to continue to go up. And I mean, that ripples through the economy. And it's not just the impact of higher gas prices. That's one thing. But fertilizer costs are going to go up, because petrochemicals are an important ingredient in fertilizers. Also, pharmaceuticals. A lot of pharmaceuticals use derivatives from petrochemicals to make them in the fabrication. So this is a broad problem, and it's not just price; it could also be supply. Because I mean, they damaged a major gas works in Qatar, I think it is, which is one of the biggest suppliers of natural gas in the world, and that got some damage. So we're going to go into a period of great pain. Where our people are already reeling from Melissa.
We're already in the period.
And now we're going to have cramps to the pain too. I mean,
welcome to being a woman.
The life of a woman.
So I'm saying, I've often felt that all hands being on deck is important. I don't know, for example, this NARA that they've set up, or that they're setting up for the the National Agency for Reconstruction, whatever it is, that's supposed to be driving through all of the projects to build back Jamaica after. You know, I've said to the Prime Minister early, include the opposition in the governance structure for these things, because listen, I mean, if you look at the worst affected areas, many of them are constituencies where we are the elected representative. You know, rain don't fall upon one man house top, as we say in Jamaica. You know, them not really business where you're a labor right or a PNP. You know, it's the same issue. So let's just build a broad coalition around these major things to try and, you know, have a national effort where everybody, especially our supporters, I think, are going to be inclined to feel that they're not getting treated as well as the others, you know, in terms of things like even how quickly relief is administered to them. And that we're even seeing that right now with this so-called roofs project, you know, where there's you get a small grant towards rebuilding a house, and our MPs are saying they're not seeing hardly any of that.
Why do you think they rejected the offer? Because, you know, that was a big thing during the time. Like, you guys actually, you know, suggesting, like, no.
I just think it's the style of the Prime Minister. He wants to run things himself, you know, and I don't think he's comfortable with sharing certain responsibilities and powers, you know. I think he prefers, remember, he was trained by Mr. Siaga, you know. Mr. Siaga had a particular style, like that, so maybe that's the style he's accustomed to. I don't know, but he definitely is not strong on consultation when it comes to us, you know, or engagement with us.
Chronixx is big up a loss in time. You got pre for booking for the next conference?
Who that?
Chronixx.
Oh.
Yeah. He's a big up our PNP.
Oh, yeah.
He's a big up our PNP.
Well, no,
and then there was an awkward pregnant person. Oh, yeah, JLP, big up himself too.
Hey, man, what can I tell you? You know, we have our historical connections with some of these artists or their families, you know. So I don't think it should be taken any particular way. But we're always glad when, you know, the entertainers remember us.
Small little music conversation.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on people saying that, you know, reggae kind of sell out now? Like, even with that, kind of, I say, oh, using me reggae Rastaman, a big up politician, a concert and all them things. Like, what are your thoughts on that, being a politician yourself?
Yeah, it's kind of fashionable to treat politicians like they're some other species, you know. We're just people like everybody else, you know, and when they're good and bad in everyone, right? So I kind of feel that we should be appreciated for the efforts that we make, and we should appreciate others for their efforts. So I don't have an issue with any artist feeling comfortable coming on a stage or meeting with us or sharing ideas or whatever. To me, that's the way it should be. And I mean, there's always been a close association between politics and popular music, you know, from way back, from before Uno Born. Right? When me a pitney, you know, there in 1972, we had a thing called the bandwagon in our campaign. This is, I mean, our campaign. I was 7, right? But so like a campaign. But I mean, man, like, you know, man like Clancy Eccles, Max Romeo, Bob Marley, and others were part of the campaign team. You know, because at that time, you know, it was better must come, and you know, time for a real meaningful transformation of Jamaica out of the colonial mindset to a more fair, just society. And that was what the My Command, the campaign in 1972 really embodied that. And I think that many of our artists could relate to that. And so they were prepared to come on board at the time. So it's not a new thing, you know,
And I mean, I don't know why artists feel as if they're supposed to be separate from the system that they live in.
Right.
Be a part of and voting is a part of the system.
Many of them who like burn out politicians, them quick for check Miss Babs if I look help when them have a problem, right? I love that. And you know, and Babs is a helpful person to artists, and you know, I have no problem with that. So I'm just saying, you know, there's some amount of double standards in the whole thing. So I hope they don't give our young conscious artists too much stress over it.
Yeah, so what's the Chronixx next conference? Right? Sir Golden, give thanks for your time.
Yes.
As
Yes.
per usual, as per always.
Yeah,
We
man.
appreciate it.
I appreciate
We
the
really do.
opportunity. You know, it's nice to interact with you guys.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And not just run politics. I mean, election time. You know what I mean? When you try to get votes, like we like that you actually like to have
Are you
conversations
checking
with
in?
us
Yeah.
about
man.
serious issues impacting the country.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Enough love and thing.
Appreciate it.
Where can
Yes.
people follow you? And of course, the PNP on the socials.
Yeah. Well, you know, my pages are out there, man. Was it Mark J. Golding? Yep, Mark J. Golding. So, you know, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, on Facebook, etc. YouTube, have a nice YouTube channel. Yeah, and then, Jamaica PNP as well. So, yeah, man, it's there, and I encourage people to follow us and see what we're saying and what we're doing. You know, you know, so please do.
Because you look such younger here. Do you miss this person?
Wow.
Look at him.
The work is
Look
stressing
at
you
him.
out, Mr. Golding.
Come out and this, Mr. Golding. Look at you. Look at
Yeah,
you.
well, I know. I think that was when probably in about 15 years ago or something. Yeah. Hey man, what can I tell you? I have a little less hair on my head, but you know, I'm still able to go and walk and talk. You know, on the road. So I'm not done yet.
Right?
Yeah.
Keep at it, man. We need the opposition to stay sharp.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's a fear of a lot of people out there that, you know, seeing that this current administration, this government is going on a fourth term.
Third.
Third, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's like people are really wary of, you know,
Yeah, man.
things being a bit too leaning
Unbridled
upon one
control.
side.
Yeah. As they should, you know, because people get
We need a strong
a
opposition.
little
them
too
on the
accustomed to
toes.
power.
Yes.
And they don't realize that it's really a humbling thing. You know, they take it for granted. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, our role is important. Yeah.
There we go.
For sure.
People. Smart Golden is to fixing our weed. I don't know. We out.
We out.